First person intervening will be Pauline Lucas. She is policy manager. In Spanish would be like a public policies manager as a literal translation. In Euro Heat and Power, in her own words, she wants district heating and cooling to be more sustainable in order to promote decarbonization and to fight climate change. Before entering Euro Heat and Power, she worked in Brussels as a policy officer, very close to the European Union environment. Today, she will tell us about the importance of waste energy recovery in the new EU framework. Pauline, the floor is yours.
A few words. So I'm Pauline Lucas, Policy Manager at Euroheat and Power. Euroheat and Power, for those of you who don't know us, we are an association based in Brussels, and we are defending the interest of the district heating and cooling sectors. So our main interlocutors are the European institutions, so the Council, the Parliament, and other associations in Brussels. So we are doing mainly lobbying, but we also involved in research and innovation projects, namely the EU-funded ones through Horizon Europe, for instance. So yeah, that was the slide about Euroheat and Power. Just for you to know, our main member when it comes to discussing policy are the national association. For instance, here in Spain we have ADAC. These are our members, but we also have research institutes and faculties and universities like here. We also have big utilities and equipment manufacturers. So that's a word about Euroheat and Power. So before going into details and telling you a little bit more about what's going on policy-wise at EU level, in particular concerning waste heat, I wanted to go back on the targets that the EU has recently adopted. So we are at an important point in time, at a bit of a turnaround in terms of energy and climate policies, as we are trying to fight the climate crisis, as our first keynote speakers has mentioned. And so we're going towards carbon neutrality as a continent, as an economy in 2050. And we also have an intermediary target in 2030, which is with regards to greenhouse gas emission, a reduction of 55% compared to the 1990 level. So this is a little bit of a background to tell you, to put things in perspective and how waste has become increasingly important also at the EU level when it comes to energy policy. So to put these targets into practice, to translate them in concrete policies and concrete measures, the European Commission has published a package with, so this was already in July this year, with a certain number of texts that are either new initiatives or revising existing legislation. I think also the first speaker spoke about how this is translated into Spanish legislation. This is how it works from the EU. It goes to national level. So this will follow the same process. But for now, this is still at the European level. And so this package is called the Fit for 55. So it's really to put all this body of legislation in line with this 55% greenhouse gases emission reduction objectives. And what we like as Euroheat and Power is that in this package there is much more emphasis on heating and cooling. It is true that, for instance, there's been a lot of progress with regards to decarbonization of electricity. I think you're not actually seeing the right slide.
intervengo en este momento porque lo que estamos haciendo es trasladar las diapositivas desde edición. Parece que hay algún tipo de problema que lo vamos a intentar solucionar ahora para que tú vuelvas a tener el manejo de las diapositivas y no tengamos que enviarlas desde edición. Si puedes cerrar el archivo, una posible causa, si puedes cerrar el archivo y compartirlo desde ahí abajo, desde ese botón.
Okay.
Comprueba, pasa atrás. No.
Bueno, pues lo que podemos hacer mientras tanto, es que tú nos vayas diciendo, por favor, qué diapositiva tiene que ir en el momento para que la gente que está haciendo la realización del acto pueda...
Should I go on?
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have the right slide on the screen, so it's okay. So I was talking about this package that was published in July. So there is more emphasis on heating and cooling. It's very important, as I think Professor Elias mentioned. It's more than 50% of final energy consumption. So there has been a number of efforts in terms of decarbonization of the electricity sector, but the heating and cooling as well as transport has more efforts to decarbonize, to be decarbonized. Okay. So there is a reinforcement of the existing framework and further recognition also in this package of the potential of waste heat recovery and use that is a key tool for decarbonization. And there are also new incentive and tools that I will be discussing in a short while. And so the two texts that we are going to focus on today are the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. So I don't know if I should. Okay. So this is okay for now. So before entering more into details of what's in this text with regards to waste heat recovery, I just wanted to give you some pointers on what is the current legal framework around waste heat recovery at the EU level. So there is no dedicated text. Basically, the Renewable Energy Directive is sort of the home of waste heat in the EU legislation, but it's also largely mentioned in energy efficiency. And that's not an accident. It's because I think waste heat recovery is really at the junction between decarbonization and energy efficiency measure. As I mentioned, yeah, there's been a growing interest in waste heat in the framework of this more ambitious climate and energy targets that were adopted. And it is really considered as a tool for decarbonization. It's been mentioned namely in latest communication of the Commission that were in the run-up to the publication of the package. For instance, the energy sector integration. So I think this also reflects a bit the Subterra principle or foundational principle, which is really bringing together sectors and energy carriers to really exploit the synergies for energy efficiency and decarbonization. Something that has appeared in the proposal to revise the Energy Efficiency Directive is the energy efficiency first principle. It's quite important, in our opinion, to prioritize waste heat if it's available, if it's technically and commercially feasible over building new renewable capacity. We should really try to make use of what's available. So this is now also defined in the EU body of work, and this will drive investment, planning, and so on. With regards to the treatment of waste heat, it's perhaps something that can be a little more problematic. Ideally, we would see that waste heat is on par with renewable. We don't say equal, but on par. but many times in the legislation, waste heat is a little bit, let's say, discriminated in comparison to renewable energies. So there is actually a definition of waste heat in the current text. We name it RED 2, but it's unchanged in RED 3, the new proposal. We're not touching this definition. And there is, I think it's quite important to make this distinction. We've been talking about energy from underground and from tunnels, etc. It's actually a service tunnel that you can see here. But there is a distinction in the Renewable Energy Directive between ambient energy, that is naturally occurring thermal energy that is already considered renewable, and waste heat, which is more a byproduct of a process. And there is a discrimination because it is not renewable. We can think that eventually in 2050 it will become renewable as more and more of this process, for instance, industry or data center will be powered by renewable sources. But it's not yet the case. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. So here I am going to go in two different slides. It's more thematic than going text by separated text. So it's mixing both Renewable Energy Directive and Energy Efficiency Directive. But the first important aspect that is proposed in these two revisions is the decarbonization of heating and cooling, so waste heat as a tool for this. So first, something that was already existing but that is being reinforced is the targets. We know how the targets are important to drive investments and to drive our economy towards decarbonization. So we have reinforcement of the existing renewable in heating and cooling target and the renewables in district heating target. They are not mandatory, but they are now being increased. And we have now also a new target on renewables in buildings. And it is also relevant for district heating. I think we've talked about on-site renewable, but district heating is actually not really on-site like solar panel, for instance, but considered as nearby. So, but it can still account, if the district heating is renewable or include waste heat, it can still account for the renewables in building targets. So this is quite a progress, and this is really setting the direction. So in order to achieve these targets, and especially the renewable in heating and cooling, the Commission has also proposed a sort of toolbox. It's not really mandatory measures, but it's something that member states can use when they are transposing the EU legislation into their national context. And here I think it's interesting, the approach is interesting because there is more and more measures on planning. So I think this is a key element when we want to recover the waste heat. I think this is what the professor was saying. You really need to include the recovery within the project when you build it from scratch, or at least it's more beneficial and easier. So the planning aspect is really key. Also, capacity building for national and local authorities to develop their knowledge on how to do energy planning and to have resources for that. Of course, in the toolbox there is the inclusion of waste heat recovery and also risk mitigation scheme. We know that this project are not always completely safe of risk. Things can happen. So there is in the toolbox the risk mitigation scheme that should be designed by member states. It is not applied yet for waste heat, it's more for renewables, but I think we will ask the institution to include waste heat in these schemes. Another part is third-party integration. So this is more related to district heating networks. This is the principle according to which basically the operator should include third-party suppliers of waste heat. So now this has become in the proposal a sort of default setting for bigger district heating networks. There are still exemptions, and this is still based on technical and commercial viability. But in case operator refuse to connect a third party, they will have to justify what reasons, for what reasons. And last but not least, a very important aspect of this new package is the new definition of efficient district heating. So this is really setting a pathway for district heating towards a gradual decarbonization already from 2026. So what is noticeable here is that already from 2035, renewable and waste heats will be the only fuel included in this definition. So there will be no longer any fossil fuel cogeneration, for instance. And the share of renewable and waste heat will increase towards achieving 100% in 2050. Here, the less positive aspect is perhaps that, I'll give you the example, in 2050 it will be 100% renewable, but there will be at least 60% of renewable capacity. So you will have to, if your network is, for instance, running 100% on waste heat, which might still be likely given the amount we have at our disposal, you might be able to, you might have to include a renewable capacity anyway. So we don't think this really makes sense with regards to the energy efficiency first principle. So we will also ask for exemption when waste heat is fully available to not have this distinction. The second part that is also from this new framework is the planning requirements and the synergy between the different EU instruments. So planning, as I mentioned, is really, really key. So I'll start with the streamlining of the EU instruments. So in the Energy Efficiency Directive, there is this sort of exercise for member states called the Comprehensive Heating and Cooling Assessment. It is asking member states to basically assess their energy demand, supply, and look into possibilities of having more efficiency into their heating and cooling, including assessing wasted sources, where they are, how much they can provide, etc. So this exercise has not been done really correctly or very high quality by member states, but we hope that this will be changed, as this will now be part of the national energy and climate plans. So it's really taking this heating and cooling planning into the bigger national energy and climate plans, so to give it more dimension and more importance, and hopefully increase the quality and the follow-up on the identification of the potential. Then attached to this, there is a cost-benefit analysis still in the Energy Efficiency Directive. So here, the cost-benefit analysis is more for certain type of activities or industrial installations. So here we have a slight change of parameters, so to better identify potential for waste heat recovery, district heating and cogeneration. For instance, we have a lowering of threshold for industrial installation, so more of this installation will have to estimate their waste heat recovery potential. We have the introduction of the data center, actually at quite a low threshold. So data centers, when they are built, will also, and for the existing one, we also have to assess what kind of capacity they have to sell their waste heat or buy cooling from district heating, of course, if they have a network nearby. And there is also the inclusion of wastewater treatment facilities. So that's also interesting for you, I suppose, at Madrid Subterra. There is as well a new aspect, which is planning for large cities. So this was not really easy to include that. The Commission has really pushed this, but member states are reluctant to actually have this kind of interference of the European Commission into their local planning, etc. But this is in the proposal, and we're really happy. It's for bigger cities. They will have an obligation to look into heating and cooling planning. Maybe we would like to suggest at least, maybe not an obligation for smaller cities, but support for smaller cities, like money, resources, capacity building, etc. So I think this will really help looking at what's available and try to decarbonize the energy supply. And something that is also new is the waste heat supportive framework. So I think Madrid Subterra is the ultimate example for what we're trying to achieve with this new provision. It's basically an established dialogue that member states should foster between all the waste heat players, so DHC operators, industrial and tertiary sector enterprises, and local authority responsible for planning and improving infrastructure. So I'm really going to take this example from Madrid Subterra now to explain and to show what it could mean to implement this article. And we're going to the conclusion now. Thank you. So there are many, many positive aspects in the package, including for waste heat. So we see a clear path for decarbonization of our sector, district heating and cooling. And this includes, of course, waste heat. We have a greater focus on energy and heat planning, and that at all governance levels. And what is perhaps a little less positive is still the treatment of waste heat, which is there are still differences. Of course, as I said, waste heat is not renewable, but really my message here is that the energy efficiency first principle should be applied. And just for a takeaway for you is that legislation is important, of course, otherwise also I wouldn't have a job. But we really need to look at the availability of waste heat, at the access to district heating, and also viable business cases, because these are really like the core of the feasibility of such project. And the facilitator or facilitation should be done with energy planning, with financing, and also, of course, with cooperation between different actors. So in terms of next steps, so these are this text and all these measures are just still proposal for now. So it's being discussed at the European Parliament, at the Council of Member States. Hopefully, given the emergency of the situation with the climate crisis, we can speed up a little bit the process, but this thing takes time. So hopefully by the end of next year, or beginning of 2023, we'll have the new legislation and member states will be able to implement. And yeah, I think I could bring you a little bit of clarity and insight from the European perspective, and now I'm happy to take any questions you may have after the session.